A startling case that I saw in the news this week I just want to tell you about. A jury over in Dallas, Texas, considered a case of a young child who died at the daycare center. And they gave an award to the family whose child died under the daycare center's care, $142 million. I'm a lawyer. I've never heard of a jury verdict that high anywhere in the history of America. Now, our old friend Rob Crain, who's been on this show before, happened to be the attorney for the parents. And so I want to call Rob and get his thoughts on this. Hey, Rob, good morning. Welcome to the Common Sense Show.
Thank you for having me, Jim. Sorry for the raspy voice this morning.
No problem. Well, to get a $142 million jury, you probably did a lot of talking over the last few weeks and few months, Rob. So, but this is really startling. I think it's a very tragic, just heartbreaking story. Would you tell our listeners just what happened to the child, how you got involved, and give us a little background, if you will?
You bet. This involves a couple who lives in one of the suburbs out here in Dallas, and one of them is a physician. The mom is a physician. She was in a residency program. They couldn't afford to have any home care, so they picked a home child care, and that's important here. It's not a child care center. It's a home child care that's licensed in the state of Texas to take care of their child. And they've trusted this outfit. They talked to other parents who had children there. They investigated it and believed that they had found a child care facility that was going to love on their child. And turns out in hindsight that few people could know that this daycare center had actually had several citations in the past. And on this particular occasion, the infant was 7.5 months old. And the daycare owner, not one of the subordinates, but the actual owner of the daycare facility, put this child, swaddled the child first and set the child on its side on an adult bed in a separate bedroom, then turned around, closed the door, left the room with no monitors, did not go in and check on the child until over 2 hours later. And
Rob, let me stop you right there. I think it's important. Some of my listeners may not know what swaddling means. Would you explain the term swaddle?
That's a great point, and we talked quite a bit about this with the jury. If you put your arms across your chest and you then lie on a floor and put your legs straight out and without using your arms or legs essentially try to roll over, that's how restrictive swaddling is. It's essentially a blanket that is wrapped around very tightly of an infant that gives that infant comfort as if that infant was still tightly in his mother's womb. And it's a soothing mechanism. But when you swaddle children, you swaddle them when they're upset and you're holding on to them. You don't put them on a bed because it's a straitjacket, and especially you don't put them on their side or their stomach because the danger of them is what happened here. This child on its side, left unattended, unmonitored, did not have the strength yet to roll over one way or the other, but had enough strength to move enough where he teetered and rolled over onto his face. And he asphyxiated because he couldn't get any air. Because he was swaddled, he could not lift his head to give himself more air. And that's where the adult bedding comes in. You don't ever put an infant on blankets and comforters. You put them on a tightly, snugly fit crib sheet. So they've got, less danger of having their face smothered.
Well, what was the defense? All right, you go into court, so you bring a lawsuit for very good reason, and you say that the daycare center was negligent. What kind of defense did they put up?
Well, and you might imagine from the size of the award, it wasn't a very good one. Essentially, what really led to this lawsuit actually going forward and into the trial, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, there's no money here, no money for the family to get. But what happened after Roger died was the daycare owner told a lie to the police officer, who immediately showed up, and then within 30 minutes stopped talking altogether, essentially lawyered up. And to this day, this daycare owner has not spoken to the police. Only through her lawyer did she give some additional information about 4 months later as to what happened. And so the defense of the case was a little mind-boggling in that the defense essentially went back to the original lie, and that original lie was that the daycare owner had placed this child on its back. And the big reason why the jury did not believe the daycare owner is because the statements that she had made through her lawyer 4 months later indicated that she had swaddled and placed the child on its side. So it was problematic defense because they were going back to a fiction, and the jury did not appreciate that.
So the jury, and I think, if I remember correctly, that your lawsuit was asking for $7 million, and the jury came in at $142 million?
Well, and I'll tell you, when we went into this case, as I mentioned, there's no insurance, and that was one of the reasons why we wanted to go to trial, is that the state of Texas requires daycare centers to carry $300,000 of insurance. Licensed daycare homes are exempt from that. They're not required to carry any insurance. And my family wanted two things. They wanted accountability. They wanted somebody to hold this person accountable for what they did to their son. And then number two, they were hoping to get a verdict and take it down to Austin, Texas, and change the laws so that any child in the future that gets hurt will have some insurance available to them to pay their medical bills. And real briefly, before I get back to the $7,142,000, the reason this is really important, Jim, is you and I talk about a lot of serious cases, and what we're seeing every day are serious injuries caused by the neglect of others, where that company is carrying very little or no insurance, and what happens is the taxpayers end up footing the bill. The injured person ends up going to the level 1 trauma center that's closest by, that is county owned, and the county taxpayers end up paying for this. And so when we went to the jury, we wanted a number that would do two things. Number one, would not be too high so that our lawmakers wouldn't scream and yell about, look at that big old verdict, we need tort reform, or, this is a runaway jury. We didn't want that, nor did we want a verdict that was too small, that did not reflect the value of a child's life and set a poor precedent. And, quite honestly, we talked a lot about it. We thought if the jury came back with about $5 million to $7 million, that would be, fine.
Sure.
And I asked the jury for $7 million, but I made it very clear to them, too, that this was their decision. And it wasn't what I thought didn't matter, what the defense counsel thought didn't matter. It was whatever they thought that mattered. And they knew. We talked to them afterwards. They knew that this daycare, they surmised, I should say, nobody told them, but they surmised that the daycare owner did not have sufficient assets to pay anything, and they made it clear.
And hey, Rob, we just got about 40 seconds is all we have left. So I guess, do you think there will be any changes brought about over this verdict in Texas?
Well, talking to your listeners, that's where it starts. Your listeners, are getting educated as to what really happens out there. And what happens is, people aren't carrying enough insurance right now, and daycare facilities need to be following regulations. And those are the two messages we're going to preach.
That's Rob Crain at crainlewis.com, who got the biggest jury award in the history of America. Rob, congratulations on the verdict. I'm sorry it happened that way. Thanks for briefing us on that way, and we'll have a chance to talk again. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jim. Bye-bye.
Freshen up your coffee. We'll be right back.